My character that I'll be playing is his shadow name is Omen. His real name is Stacy Keller. He knows it's a girl's name. He will beat you up if you mention it to him. He's an ex-Salem detective who's gone into the private sector and become a legitimate gumshoe. So he's got a wound in his leg that magic can't heal. And it caused him to go into an awakening and overturn his life into a shambles. There's a girl, and it's complicated. You know, his life it's kind of ended in a sense and begun again in another, I guess would be the best way to put that. All right, so his vice is greed. Foremost, his vice is it's very magey. He wants answers, he wants secrets, he wants supernatural experiences. He's seen a lot of weird shit during his awakening, and he wants more. But he's also greedy for mundane wealth because he's also a broke-ass PI. I mean, what are you going to do? His virtue is justice. He is very concerned with injustice. He hates seeing bad guys get away. He's seen a lot of that in his life, and he's just sick and tired of it and doesn't want to let it happen anymore. The things that will break Stacy down. Cruelty to women. That's a big one. He's seen it a lot in his history with his mother, with other women in his life. He just can't stand it, and he's afraid of becoming his father, and so that just tears him up like crazy. The next one is standing idly by while the bad guy wins. Again, you know, he's seen a lot of injustice in his life, and he's sick and tired of letting it happen, and just the bad guy getting away is bad enough, but seeing the bad guy win on top of that is just rubbing salt in the wound, and it just makes him go crazy. He's scared of legitimate Fae encounters. Like, his time in the land of the Fae was not happy. It was not a good time. He had a rough awakening. He's learned to accept the fact that, you know, that's over there. It's still part of reality, but it's not, you know, actively out to get him anymore. But if he ran into a real Fae, that would be they're known for being able to break rules while maintaining their word. They're known for being slippery little devils who can always get the upper hand. They always make you regret ever having made a deal with them in the first place, every single time. And so even if he was able to summon one up and was technically in control of the situation, he would be terrified that, holy crap, this is probably going to end really badly. Another fear, being shot at. Why? Well, that would probably be because the last time he was shot at, he ended up with a really bad bullet wound that's still bugging him, and right after getting shot, he woke up in Fairyland. Alright, so his path. He is an acanthus. Basically, they're the guys who can see into the future, they can see into the past, they see all of the answers. They can choose fate, destiny. You can't fight it when they decide that something is going to happen because fate says it has to happen. They scheme and they manipulate, and they're just as tricky as the Fae. You know, like, they could say one thing and then reverse time, and it never actually was something that they said. So they are the guys who come up with the crazy Xanatos gambits that always seem to work out. They're incredibly lucky and graceful. You know, they're the ones who seem like they've got it all because they just go ahead and pick the destiny that they want to have, and it is so they do have it all. They just choose it. The magical style that Omen uses is the way he understands things is, especially coming from the land of Fae, where time is all kinds of out of whack. When you see an omen, that's the reality. That's what's actually happening. And then the things that happen after that the omen foretold, that's just an echo of the supernal truth that you are seeing right there in that moment. When he uses a magical tool, like his tarot deck is his dedicated tool, he's looking for the signs that he wants to have echoed into reality. He picks, the herald in order to have a message delivered. And then also because of his time in fairy, his magic is pretty heavily influenced by other like Fey superstitions. So if he wants to shield himself, he'll throw salt over his shoulder. If he wants to go unnoticed, he'll turn his jacket inside out and wear it because that makes himself invisible to the Fey. All right, his nimbus, his magical aura, is supposed to evoke the wild hunt. It plays a little bit with his vice and his virtue. In terms of his virtue, it's fairy justice. You broke fairy law, and it's going to come down on you, and it's probably not going to end well for you. And it also plays with his vice. I mean, a hunt for sport is, by definition, an act of greed. I mean, it's an act of destruction, but it's definitely greedy. You're chasing down a life that you don't need even. So when his nimbus flares, people, they have a sensation of knowing predator and prey relations, understanding I am prey to this person or I am the predator, and they have kind of a choice of joining the hunt and becoming part of the hunt, or becoming the prey and accepting their fate. They will get a sense of being ganged up on by enemies, or having a bunch of allies. They'll hear dogs barking and hunting horns, and they'll smell fear and death chasing after them, and they'll be able to sense a forest around them and see the shadows of it, or see the moonlight washing through the leaves. Signs of the prey, kind of omens of the hunt, become really prominent, like bows and arrows, or teeth and claws, wounds that are inflicted on the prey. And you end up feeling, things in your path, brambles, thorns, you feel the hunt in a physical sense too, the slick of your sweat, the pounding of your heart, taste blood. He's kind of spread out in terms of arcana, which there are 10 arcana, and he's got quite a few of them, but he's pretty low in most of them, and he has, kind of weaker capacity compared to other mages who are more practiced in just a few of them. He's an initiate of death, which means that, and death governs shadows and dead things in ghostly twilight and the underworld. So he can see ghosts and talk to them. He can see Avernian gates that ghosts go through in order to enter the underworld. And sometimes mages do too if they're powerful enough, but he's not quite there yet. He's an apprentice of fate. That means he's a little bit more adept with it than he is with death. Fate governs, like destiny, luck, like narratives, big forces that kind of like govern what happens to who and why. And he can see those things in motion, right? He can influence them a little bit, like make things that are likely to happen more likely to happen, influence people's luck a little bit. He can read people's destinies and see what's going to happen to them. He's an initiate of matter, which basically governs anything that's made out of anything else. Just about, like, walls, floors, the air we breathe. He's only an initiate, though, so that means that he's pretty limited in his capabilities. He can make machines function like they're supposed to function, or he could do something like figure out how a machine works, or even just figure out what the material composition of the dirt in his fingernails is, if he felt like it and he was bored. He is an apprentice of mind. Mind governs... a little bit it governs access to the astral, which is a different realm from our reality. It kind of is tied to your own subconscious and humanity's subconscious and then the world's subconscious. So mind helps out a little bit with that. And it also allows him to read the minds of others, read their emotions. Since he's an apprentice, he can also like change their thoughts around a little bit, maybe tweak their memories here or there. Space. Probably one of my favorites. He's an apprentice of space, and space governs location, where things are. It also governs sympathy, which is like how metaphorically close something is to you. Like, I mean, I might have this coffee mug or this mason jar sitting right here in my hand, but unless it's something I'm really emotionally attached to, I happen to win it in a 5K, so I am actually emotionally attached to it. It's not close to you in terms of space, sympathy. Um, but because it is close to me, even if it was halfway around the world, I'd still be able to find it and affect it with magic because it's important to me and because it's close to me. And he can do that kind of magic because he is an apprentice of space. He's studied enough of it to be able to do that kind of thing, and he can also see things that are really far away. He can move things around a little bit, like make two things switch places. And then the last arcana that he has is time, and that's a fun one. Time obviously governs everything that we perceive as time, the perception of time, future events, past events, things that happened and things that could happen, and also the rate at which it occurs. So he can tweak it a little bit, like mess up people's perception of time. He can look into the past. He can look to a limited degree into the future. He'll get a lot better at that probably as time goes on. Yes, that's... Stacy didn't come from a very happy home. His dad was a deadbeat drunk, and his mom ended up taking the most of it in order to shield Stacy from it. But just because someone is able to shield you from the worst of it doesn't mean you don't know what's happening, and you don't feel something for the person that's being more heavily affected by it. And so those are the worst memories of his young life, is his mom being beaten by his dad. And it ended tragically too, because his mom worked really hard and she'd be out late at night, and his dad would be deadbeat drunk at home. And one night while his mom was out working late, his dad was drunk like normal, and Stacy was hiding in his room, and the dad thought that there was an intruder breaking into the house, and so he got his gun and he shot the intruder, and it turned out it was actually Stacy's mom. I just realized the connection to the song. His dad ended up going to jail for that, obviously, for committing murder, manslaughter, and that left young Stacy kind of stranded. There was a lady who was a cop. She had worked the case, and she was willing to foster Stacy. She was kind enough to do that. And he ended up having a lot of respect for her because she was willing to take him in, even though he was a complete stranger to her. And she was willing to, and she was a good woman, but she had her faults too. She had a biological son that she ended up favoring a lot more than Stacy, and she would let her affections for her biological son blind her to her son's faults. He was, into drugs, and he did, vandalism, ran with a gang, whatever. He did bad stuff, and then he would go ahead and blame most of it that he got caught for on Stacy to his mom, and his mom would just lap it up. And so even though Stacy had a lot of respect for her and even ended up going into the police force because of her influence, he never really got that close to her. And when he turned 18 and after joining the police force, he kind of drifted away from her. And then there's the girl, the love of his life, Rose. What he does not know is that she's the daughter of a mob boss, and she is also working in the mob. But the reasons why she's working in the mob are different than what you might think. And keep in mind, he does not know this. She's really bright, was going to school as a lawyer, and she ended up, she was trying to fight for, to make the world a better place. She wanted to look out for the little guy, to take care of people that needed it, as a complete rejection or rebellion against her father and his way of life. But eventually she reached a tipping point where she decided that it was the system itself was broken, and there was no point in working in the system because the system wasn't fixing the problem. It was just sometimes taking care of the symptoms. And so she ended up becoming a criminal herself joining the mob, ended up becoming a lieutenant for her father and eventually replacing him. And she's working to use the criminal element to fight the criminal element, cut it down, eliminate it, eventually just cripple it so that it collapses and can be cleaned up and swept away and gone for good, she hopes. Stacy has no idea that any of this has gone on. The only reason they even met is because he had information from a case he was working that she needed to get her hands on. And so she got close to him and she basically seduced the information out of him. And he's just, innocent dupe, was like, well, that was a hot girl who I accidentally told some stuff that I probably shouldn't have. Hopefully she won't use it against him. And then after she had the information, she broke up with him. But the fact that he is sincerely interested in helping other people and bringing the bad guys to justice and cleaning up, all of the bad things that people like her father did, she has real feelings for him. And he has real feelings for her too, but he's terrified of holding on to her because he doesn't want to end up like his dad, a drunk who will beat women and mistreat them, acting like he's got the right to be possessive and controlling and an utter bastard. So their relationship has been kind of on and off. She leaves him because she can't handle the pressure of keeping secrets from him anymore. And he keeps letting her go, even though that's the last thing he wants to have happen. So what happened is he was working a case. It seemed like it was perfectly normal. He had managed to find someone who he assumed was the perpetrator of a crime, and he was going to make an arrest. And he ended up getting jumped and then shot, but he wasn't shot by a normal bullet. Instead, this bullet was tainted with the Abyss. It's an unreality that mages have called the Abyss because there's not really a better term for it. And a lot of it's a corruptive influence. It's kind of trying to devour our world and replace it. And so he felt this corruption entering his body and tearing him apart, trying to change and twist his soul, break it into its own shape. And he woke up and he was in Fairy. A strange place where everything relies on narrative rules and where you can tell where the story is going if you've been there before and seen it happen. And also where you have tricky little bastards like Puck, who can turn your head into a donkey just because he feels like it. And they have to keep their word, but they're so tricky about just what their word is that they can get away with anything. Even the exact opposite of what they said they wouldn't do or would do. He managed to fight his way, not fight literally, but I mean like struggle through the land of Fairy. Eventually, over the course of some rather harrowing adventures, he managed to find a ship that promised passage back to home. Because, in Fairy, you can find magic that'll do anything. For a price. And so he said, yeah, sure, and signed his name onto the register of the ship in order to be given passage back home. And it turned out the price was about 5 years that he lost from the time that he was shot to the time that he woke back up in the mortal world. And so now his mortal life is a shambles. And it's hard to reclaim any of it while he's struggling with building on this new magical life that he's found too. And there's also, troubles with reconnecting with Rose,